I think every designer had this moment. You improve a flow, you launch the design, everything feels like great. And then after 6 months, 1 year, the exact same problem comes back. It's coming back even worse, or no one knows whether the change actually worked. And that's actually the worst part of it. So that usually happens when teams design features, but they don't build necessary systems around that. So for me, data infrastructure is what makes a good idea actually reusable. So it's not just a one-time fix. And for organizations, great infrastructure is when they keep using the system which you created. Otherwise, every new feature becomes a guesswork if you don't have any infrastructure set up. So every new designer needs to start from zero.
What we seek shapes what we build. This is If You Seek by Useberry. Hello, everybody. This is Nicole Fotaki. Welcome back to If You Seek. Today's guest is someone who's redefining what it means to design for impact. Ramona Zeman is a growth designer and the founder of Ahead Studio, Moldova's first growth-focused design agency. She started her career in Germany designing beautiful packaging, but soon realized that beauty alone doesn't fix conversion funnels. That insight pulled her into the world of product and growth design. She later joined Crunchyroll, where 120 million anime fans taught her that even a tiny UX change can make thousands of people hit subscribe. Now, Ramona helps companies and governments design digital services that don't confuse humans. Through UX audits, experiments, and smart design systems, she proves that sometimes a 2-line copy fix can outperform a 30-page redesign. She also teaches workshops, mentors young designers, and advocates for experimentation over assumptions. Her mantra says it all: design shouldn't guess, it should prove. Welcome, Ramona. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for the nice introduction. And I'm very happy to be here and have a nice conversation with you.
It's going to be very exciting. So, let's get started. You started as a graphic designer and evolved into leading UX and growth-focused projects. What sparked that shift from pure design to using design as a tool for business growth?
Yeah, so I started back in the days as a designer and as a graphic designer, actually, and graduated as well in design and began my career into the packaging world at Peter Schmidt Group in Germany. And I was working there on packaging projects for big consumer brands. And later on, I moved into, creative agencies that focus mostly on print campaigns, everything what is around advertising, posters, annual report design and branding. And, back in the days, that was like the thing, this is what was the world about design. And, but then the world changed, iPhones appeared and apps became now the thing. And suddenly, businesses didn't just want people to see their brand, right? So they wanted that people interact with it. So to click, to buy, to sign up, and to reach out. And that's when I realized the moment a design becomes static, like a print advertising, its power to kind of create growth kind of ends here. Like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. I mean, a graphic design is still a great thing. It has all the beautiful facets, and it's definitely not dead if we follow this. Design is dead, print is dead, and so on. Um, but it wasn't where I wanted to be anymore. I liked and I like projects that kind of move and are big, are complicated, and definitely are digital, and products that grow that have as well an impact on both sides, on the business especially, and as well for the users who are using that product. At the time, it wasn't a common talk about that design impacts business. That's recently something new, that design impacts business. And it was all about how things were looking. That was in the past the thing, which is, the visual aspect was still dominating, which is, of course, important. But what I wanted to hear is someone saying, Ramona, because of your design, our signups went up, or because of the flow, our retention improved. Yeah. So
Hmm.
that's what I was looking for. And before I had even a language or a name for it. So the real spark, if we speak about the spark, was coming during my time at Crunchyroll, which is one of the biggest streaming platforms for the anime world. And I was part of the growth team. And that's where design basically finally met the data. Uh, so we were not just redesigning features, we were basically mapping out user journeys, how people are signing up, where they drop, and what makes them stay. That was
Hmm.
the important part. And it was almost like, running UX audits in real time. So we looked at the acquisition, right? We looked at the retention, we looked at the churn. So we really looked into the data and trying small design experiments, how we called that, to see what actually moved the metrics. So you have design A, we change something, test it, and see what's the difference between the A and B in terms of the metrics. And I still remember one test where we changed like the upgrading flow for an existing free user. What we did, we basically offered less steps, a clearer language. So it was really about the content, and suddenly the retention improved. People were signing up. And that was the moment where I realized, that's it. That's exactly what I wanted. I want that somehow my work is driving growth, not just for the end user, but as well, like I'm part of impacting the business for which I'm working. And I think once you see how one change in a user flow can move thousands of people in a different or can move people differently, you never go back to like some static design. I can't do that. So yeah, the growth team at Crunchyroll was basically my first spark in understanding that design can really direct impact the business. Yeah.
It's fascinating that the idea that you can literally watch a design decision ripple through user
Yeah.
behavior,
Yeah.
and
That
yeah, and that really sets the stage for this bigger conversation around growth design, because it's not just about making something usable anymore. It's about designing for measurable outcomes. And yeah, so growth design is becoming a big topic, but it often means different things to different people. How do you define growth design, and how does it differ from traditional UX or product design?
I think growth design, yeah, it's becoming right now a term, and it's more often used. Um, but I think growth design as a term is one of those terms that everyone like kind of nods to, right? So it's like, yeah, yeah, right. That's the thing. But if you ask 10 designers, you will probably get also 10 completely different answers, which is fine because I would guess all of them are kind of right, but in their own way. Because growth design isn't just like one fixed discipline. It's like it adapts, right? It adapts on the context where it gets introduced. So in startups, for example, it might mean experimentation and or experimenting and optimizing like kind of funnels. In big product companies, it's often about like engagement or retention. And in public services, like the ones where I work right now, it can mean designing for adoption, for example, helping people actually use digital services, right? So if we speak about digital transformation or digitalizing public services, growth in this context would mean like we need to help people to kind of adapt using actually digital services. So for me, growth design is really simple. Growth design is UX with accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by saying this, so in UX, the goal is to make things usable and enjoyable, right? So you care about the flows, the accessibility, the micro interaction which are happening there, and all the good stuff. But once the design is handed off, the job is done, right? So in growth design, you don't stop there, right? So you hold yourself accountable, and that's now the important part, for what happens after. So the design is not done. Design is never done. But important is like what happens after you deliver your design. And here comes in, do people actually sign up? Do they actually come back? Did the design change improved actually something? The revenue, the signups, the whatever you wanted to achieve there. So that's what actually accountability means. So you measure the outcome of your design, you are responsible for its impact, and you learn as well from what worked and what didn't work, right? So that's also your job as a designer to understand, okay, I created that, but did it actually work or not, and why? So when I was in that function or holding the title of a UX designer, my success as a designer was measured by the quality of the experience. So when I became or holding the title of a product designer, which was in a different context, and I don't want to get now into what's the difference between UX and UI designer, product designer, but uh, but because in my different titles, I had different responsibilities or different expectations. So that's why I'm just breaking it down into those steps. So when I was holding the product designer title, my success had to be as well aligned with like business goals. So in this hierarchical structure, then later on, somehow business goals were also important for me as a designer. But growth design for me, it's like kind of connecting both of them. It's the middle space where you prioritize the needs of the people and the performance. So success and growth means people are doing it and you can prove it, you know, because it's backed up with data. Let me give you one example. We were like redesigning an onboarding for an app. And in the context of a UX designer, it was like simple, make the onboarding simple and clear. Yeah. But as a growth designer, I'm doing it clear and simple. My job is done. But I would measure then later on, or I'm interested in how many users actually finished that onboarding, right? And still use the app a week later, you know? And that's where the tests variations are as well playing an important role. And that's basically what Head Studio is built around. So we help companies connect design, data, and the mindset of experimentation so they can see how the UX, which they actually asked for, impacts their growth. So sometimes that means running UX audits and fixing some issues in the flow, and sometimes it's building something from scratch with tracking already in place. So it's about sometimes it's really understanding what's happening in your product. Sometimes it's about like analyzing if there are too many steps, too many unnecessary things, and not thinking about like huge big redesigns, but analyzing like how you can optimize what you have already there.
This definition that UX with accountability,
Yeah.
it reframes design from something subjective into something testable and repeatable. And it's interesting you put it that way, because once design becomes measurable, data naturally enters the picture. And that's
Exactly.
where things can get tricky though.
Yeah,
um
that's true.
yeah.
What I also wanted to say is that I think growth design, I mean, in a nutshell, it doesn't differ much from UX. I know I put now UX a bit as like, the job is done when you just do the screens and the flows. It's not really like that, but growth design, it's more like an extendable arm.
Mm.
And it's basically like a mindset. So think
Mm.
not just in flows and, the job is done now of a user, but like, okay, you did the thing, but then also care about what's happening after. So it's kind of like a mindset which we have to bring, so that we can bring as well the business aspect and the data, especially into this conversation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your process puts analytics and experimentation at the core of design. How do you balance creativity with data? And how do you make it sure that data doesn't kill good ideas?
Yeah. So that's the tricky part. That's a good question and difficult to answer. I get why people think that once you bring this boring data and analytics, super complicated, which nobody understands, a lot of people then suddenly think that design becomes that a very calculated and almost robotic job, right? So it's like, you have to, um, like you are just optimizing numbers and instead of like creating something new.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm not a numbers person. I'm also, like it's tricky, it's difficult,
Yeah.
but it's really interesting once you understand, like un- understanding, reading the data outcome and putting it in like your in comparison with your design or connecting the dots. It kind of becomes actually very cool. It's like kind of becoming a detective into that.
Ah.
For me, data doesn't replace kind of creativity. So
Mhm.
I always say that data shows you where to look and
Mm.
not what to create. So here starts the creativity. So it's like having a map, the numbers tell you where people get lost,
Yeah.
but the creativity is like how you decide to guide the people actually back, right? So now you start to be creative and trying to find solutions like how to improve something. So I had one project. Users kept dropping off right before completing a form, and the data was showing like a very clear pattern, but it was not telling me why. Like what's happening on there, like why people are dropping off just before filling out that form. And the data was like fine, and we couldn't with that data we also couldn't understand like what's really going on. So that was the moment where we kind of went a step deeper, and we're asking, okay, let's kind of test that. Let's do like a moderated test, because we needed really like qualitative feedback, like really user feedback, and not just a bulk question. So we really needed to figure out what's going on there. So we did a user test and realized that the voice of tone, like the way how the content was
Mm.
written, was too formal for the people. They were really not understanding what was asked from them. So people weren't really sure if they were, I think, allowed to continue without certain information or something like that. So the job was like not redesigning and redoing everything. It was really about the content structure and how the things were written. So it was really about copywriting. And so what we did is like we offered more, a content that was more plain, friendly, and very straightforward. Same layout, same flow, and the completion rate jumped immediately. So that's not like data versus creativity. It's like really data and creativity, because with data you become actually more creative and finding the right solution for a specific problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. The more, let's say, mature teams become, the more they realize creativity and data don't compete, that they can coexist.
Yeah.
And yeah, one gives you the direction, the other gives you the depth, which makes me think about how the approach plays out when results start to dip, because not every problem needs a redesign. And you've mentioned that a redesign isn't always the answer. Can you walk us through how you uncover the real problem behind poor conversions or user drop offs, and what kind of design experience experiments actually move the metrics?
Yeah. So, usually clients are coming to like, we need to redesign everything. We need something new, we need a refresh. But really, very, very often, it's not about a redesign is really isn't always the answer, because most teams, when the numbers starting somehow to drop, immediately think about, visual refresh. We need to redesign. We need to revamp everything. Designers go straight into Figma, starting to, change everything, doing something, changing the interface. But the truth is, a new interface won't fix always the broken funnel, actually. It's like repainting the house when you actually have a problem with the foundation. Yeah. So that's why my approach is always like, and I think majority of the designers are as well doing that, uh getting a diagnosis, right? Like trying to understand what's actually happening, and don't jump right away into Figma and design something, but assess what's going on. And that's what we do as well at the Head Studio. We run like so-called growth audits. See it as an onboarding questionnaire, right? So where we ask clients or the teams what's currently their analytics, what the data is telling, like if they have as well user feedback, what they actually want to achieve, right? What are their KPIs, so that we have first like a real input of like the metrics or the information from the company or from the team. And if there is no data, which is also very often the case, so we kind of, I mean, it's not about that we guess what might be wrong, but what we do is like we run hypothesis driven audits. So that means um, we believe that A causes the drop, right? So if we do A, we expect B. And I'm as well completing those hypotheses with like grayscaling designs. So that means if I'm proposing, like, hey, if we would add now here a button below a title, um, and I'm showing that in different variations, it's not like I'm proposing a design, but I'm proposing like a structure of like where we should place a call to action, right? And then we decide basically on the variations, based on the ideas which we offer, like what we could do and what we could achieve. And we are deciding which variations might work for us. We design them, and then we basically implement them and run experiments. But audits really matter, and that's also important if we can measure the impact. So that's why we define KPIs, so that key numbers show the real progress, like the activation, the conversions, the retention, and the revenue, of course. And these metrics tells us if the product is actually working, where it's leaking, and what actually to fix first. And to run as well real experiments, I mean, tracking has as well to work. So we make sure events. So if we speak about data structure or data analytics, then we also need to make sure that kind of events in the tools like Amplitude, for example,
Wow.
are mapped correctly and dashboards are kind of in place so that the client as well can see what's going on in their product at a glance in the most important funnels, right? And when I'm speaking about funnels, they are all connected through like call to actions. So that's why it's sometimes very important how you connect your content in connection with like, okay, you are telling the user something, but what you want them to do. Like, is it now signing up? Is it now clicking and going somewhere else because there is something else where you want to let them do something? So that's why the placement of buttons are important because they are the event trackers. From there, you can understand okay, they selected it, they went there, and then they were doing something. That's why on e commerce, the buttons are important. So they need to understand where they can click in order to go to the checkout flow or to the shopping cart. This is where Ahead Studio, so when we speak about mapping out events and creating those dashboards for the clients to understand like what's going on, this is where also Ahead Studio is partnering with another company, which is called Otherside, because they are handling for us a bit like the analytics infrastructure. And we turn basically the insights which we get there into the UX actions. So the feedback loop is very clear. It's like you have the data, you are either testing or designing, or design and test. You learn from that, and then you repeat it again. So I have one great example where it's again connected with like, redesigning is not always necessary.
We love
Is
examples.
yeah. So we worked with a company that helps people notarize documents online. Very straightforward, like simple product. You upload your document, it gets verified, it gets signs, and you pay. Uh, what we knew from the client is that they kind of felt that the conversion rate was very low. Somehow, people are selecting the button "Notarize now," but then somehow they're getting lost. I mean, the completion rate is also not happening. So we looked at the behavioral data. We were working with Amplitude back in the days, and we also connected. I don't know which other tool we connected there, but we had multiple data streams where it was like very obvious what's going on. And so we looked at the behavioral data and saw that users bouncing between pages searching for the price.
Okay.
So the main call to action, like notarize now or something like that, was visible. People were clicking it, but then going somehow back, and they were looking for the price. But the price was like buried, I don't know, 2 pages away, deeper under some tabs and legal text. So what we did, we basically there was really no redesign. Like we basically played Lego. So we took basically the price component, which was very clear, nice. We just took it from this other page under a tab back to the home page, placed it under the button, and that's it.
Yeah, voila.
You know. And so no redesign, no like crazy, I don't know, something. And the result was crazy. It was really like 20% of upload to purchase rate. So after really placing that price in connection as well with a call to action like notarize now, which had the same function. I mean, it was leading you to the same thing, but it was people were already aware of what does it cost, and that's it. That was the whole problem of this whole page, and that was cool, like, so that was where I understood design can move really, like, as well the business, and there was no need of painting the house, and it was really just fixing the foundation. And yeah, so and that was an audit which was run with, it was a bit pure data. I mean, poor data, sorry, not pure, but poor data, because it was not really yet set up very well. So I had a bit of like data to work with, but it was really driven by a hypothesis driven audit. So I really was verifying first, okay, like I want to notarize now, and where's the price? Like how should I know? Like I'm starting the journey, going back, and then this back and forth that was like confusing. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's you mentioned this before also, the detective, the investigation. It does sound like you're describing design as investigation. And that diagnostic mindset feels really critical. And yeah, so this mindset probably extends to how you validate ideas too, especially when you're testing concepts before committing development resources. All right, real quick before we jump back in, you know how product teams are always trying to move faster and research teams are trying to move smarter? Well, Useberry actually helps you do both. It lets you run quick remote user tests, and honestly, they're just as easy to run as they are to share. No bottlenecks, no endless waiting around, and definitely no more guessing. It's just research that moves at the speed of product. Check it out at useberry.com. So, you've worked on massive projects from e-commerce funnels to national apps, and tools like Useberry seem central to your process. How does testing early with prototypes change the way teams invest in design and development?
Yeah. Before I will get into another example, I will tell you that I belong to those designers or to those people who doesn't fall in love with like new tools.
Yeah.
If it still works, I don't touch it. Like I'm very difficult to change to new things. So back in the days when Photoshop was a thing, it was super mega difficult to make me switch from Photoshop to Sketch.
Mm.
It was a full on trauma. So for me actually, like new tools, if I want to use really a new tool, it really has to solve a real problem for me. And ideally, it also should not give me anxiety while
Yes.
doing it, because well, I'm like, you know.
Mm.
Um, and last year, when I was working on that governmental project, and we had access to a very large numbers of potential users. It was like more than 2,000 potential users, and I wanted a way to test early some prototypes which we created, some designs, to see if people basically understood the content and if they could find like certain key actions which we kind of changed from the initial design. So we wanted to see if the flows and the content would make sense to people. But I didn't wanted to set up, like a complex, moderated
Mm.
session and spend weeks on recruiting the right users. What I needed was something very simple, like upload a Figma prototype, write a few questions or tasks, and send them out a link, collect feedback, and that's it. Like I wanted something very simple, and I was using it. And I think in another design community, someone was mentioning Useberry, and I was like, okay, let's give it a try. I hope I hope it's not difficult to use, because in my previous companies we were also using some tools, but I remember they felt difficult, and I was like, oh no, not again, something where I need to have a PhD in something. But yeah, as someone like me who gets anxiety from tools that look like complex, airplane cockpits, I was very surprised. Useberry was like really easy to use. Like it was very intuitive, and it was more than I expected, because it had this heat maps, which was super cool. It was a super cool tool. It has this completion flows, and it had even, and that was also great, because it had that conditional logic
Hmm.
that adapts to users' answers, and
Yes.
that was also important for me because I really could create out with that tool. Adding their prototypes, I could even prototype the whole survey, So that was like perfect. So we used the test basically to figure out if this discoverability and if the content was clear to the people or to the citizens. And the result was super great because we wanted to figure out if people can navigate. And the navigation, we figured out that the navigation wasn't the problem, but it was again like the content structure,
You know.
the voice and tone, the language, and how the content was structured to the user. So instead of redesigning again the screens, it was about like rewriting the content and reordering as well the content. And that's what early testing does. It saves you time from building, the wrong things beautiful, right? So
Mm.
you're spending time designing high fidelity designs and pixel perfect, but then maybe it's not worth it. So testing prototypes early saves time, budget, I mean money, because by the time development starts, we already know what's working and what's not, what confuses people, and what actually needs another round. So the beauty of tools like Useberry is that they make testing that they make feel that testing is super easy, and you sometimes really don't need like a huge research team. And
Mm.
not all the time, but that's a cool tool which will help you be independent. Yeah, so I would say testing isn't as well like the final stop. It's supposed to be part of any design process or design itself. And yeah, it helped teams learn faster, argue less, having less discussion, having less 50 shades of meetings, where everybody has an opinion. So you have data, information, real proof that, hey, let's not redesign again something here.
Hmm.
Users, they understand what they see here. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's about learning early and
Yeah.
avoiding costly assumptions.
Yeah.
And yeah, that mindset really separates the mature teams from the reactive ones. So I loved your example, which ties perfectly into the foundation behind all of this. Because testing and iteration only work if the data underneath is solid.
Yeah.
So a lot of your work also involves setting up analytics and governance, something most designers overlook. Why is data infrastructure such an essential part of modern UX, and how does it empower teams long term?
I think every designer had this moment, you improve a flow, you launch the design, everything feels like great. And then after 6 months, 1 year later, the exact same problem comes back. it it's coming back even worse, or no one knows whether the change actually worked, and that's actually the worst part of it. So that usually happens when teams design features but they don't build necessary systems around that. So for me, data infrastructure is what makes a, a good idea actually reusable, right? So it's not just a one-time fix. And for organizations, if we speak about organizations, great infrastructure is when they keep using the system which you created around. So it's like the tracking, the KPIs which you set, the dashboard which you have, the shared components. If we speak about design systems, yeah, the rules for how something should be built. Otherwise, um, every so if we speak about if you want to implement a feature, yeah, so every new feature becomes a guesswork if you don't have any infrastructure set up. So every new designer needs to start from zero if you don't, for example, has a design system, right? So if we speak about data, you don't have anything set up, you always start from scratch, but what do we want to actually to achieve? If you don't have a design system, you always need to start from scratch, right? So, and if you have systems in different directions set up, it kind of speed up as well your process, and you don't need to do anything from zero. Um, in big products, especially like currently working on some governmental platforms, this becomes very critical if we speak about systems. So if you have 30 or 40 institutions all building their own version of the same thing with different UI, different ways of measuring success, it turns naturally into chaos because people get 40 different experiences and nobody knows what's working, right? But the moment you add like governance, measurement, shared patterns, clear ownership, suddenly every team is speaking the same language, right? So we all have the same understanding. If one institution learns that users don't read legal text on mobile, that learning becomes part of the system and everyone benefits basically from it. And it's also the same. I mean, the same applies not just to governmental organizations, but it also applies to any business or startups, and you know. So you don't want a design. You don't want a design change that works just once, right? So you don't want just to have it once fix. You want to understand why it worked, how to measure it, and how to repeat it without reinventing the wheel new every time. So for me, data infrastructure isn't just about dashboards, right? So viewing the data at a glance, but it's also about having like a culture around that, like having a mindset about that, or yeah. So it's design basically at the scale. A designer can leave, right? So if a designer is leaving, a new team will join, and the system is still there and keeps learning, right? So you have to create a system that is like staying there, and regardless who will join, what will happen, you have a foundation set up, and that's how you basically create long-term impact, not just like one-time improvements.
It's the invisible architecture that lets creativity compound instead of getting lost in chaos. Uh, and it feels like that same systems thinking mindset is shaping how design roles themselves are evolving. And yeah, so as design becomes more tied to performance and ROI, where do you see the role of the growth designer heading next? Will it replace traditional UX roles or simply evolve them?
I don't think that growth design will replace UX, but I do think it will change it a bit. As I mentioned previously, like I see, UX as a foundation, and then growth is basically the extended arm of it. So for me, they are like both connected. So that's why if growth design is becoming now the word, the term, it's not replacing, it's just really a combination of it. And for a long time, as I mentioned, UX was measured by the usability, right? So is it clear? Is it easy? Is it easy to understand and easy to use? I mean, that's still important, but now what companies are asking is, does it convert, right? Does it retain users? Is it worth building it, right? So growth design is just simply like the next layer of maturity. And I think the designer of the future won't just be like a pixel pusher, an
Hmm.
expert in like moving things around. They I think designers will be like the behavior analysts, like the strategic thinkers, the hypothesis makers. Like what's going on here, right? So like someone who understands like people, understand the product and the performance, and that everything at the same time. That's how I see how a UX designer will grow or evolve in a direction. And I think that's cool. I mean, I think that's a ideal case, because what designers are usually struggling with, that we don't have the table at the, at the business table, at the C table. So because finally it puts us designers at that business table where we always wanted to be. So we are not anymore the make it pretty department. It's like we are not there anymore. Yes, I know it's not perfect, but we designers are changing a bit once we use like really business terms, and not just using them but also understanding them and can use them in our daily work life. That makes us look and feel in a very different way. So designers who will really thrive are the ones who read data without being afraid of it, run experiments instead of like having assumptions, collaborate as well with product, with engineers, with researchers teams, with analytics. So having really this cross-functional discussion, and UX and product design will naturally evolve into like a growth focus roles. I mean, it's already happening, not because it's like trendy, but because companies can feel that or see and feel that design can really have an impact. And I think this shift is good for designers. And when you tie your work to kind of real results, to conversions, to satisfaction, and you kind of, as a designer, gain influence. It's like not anymore you are the pixel pusher. You are like
No.
driving real impact, and your decisions matter more than it was. And you have now a voice where you prioritize as well something. So because at the end of the day, growth design, it's really not just a job title. It's really like a mindset.
Yeah, that balance, understanding people, product, and performance is what makes the next generation of designers so powerful. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And that feels like the perfect note to end on. Design, not just as a craft, but as a driver of real growth and impact. Uh,
Yeah.
Ramona, thank you so much for joining If You Seek and sharing such a thoughtful look into how design and data can truly drive growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll link to Ahead Studio and all of Ramona's work in the show notes, so definitely check that out. Thank you, everyone, to listening to If You Seek. Until next time, keep designing with purpose and thinking of outcomes. Thank you. For more exciting content, follow us on our social channels. Your reviews mean the world to us, so don't forget to leave one. And of course, hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest episodes. If You Seek is a platform for discussions and personal insights. The opinions presented by guests are independent and do not represent the official position of the host, Usberry, or our sponsors.